Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful Gossips 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Finn sat in the quiet of his apartment, the envelope shaking in his hands as if it carried the weight of the world, which in a way it did. He'd avoided opening Luna's final letter for weeks, telling himself he demanded time, that he wasn't ready, that perhaps the verity was safer left wing buried, but now, gaping at her familiar handwriting, each elegant circle and coil screamed at him with the closeness of 1,000 participated moments, and he could no longer repel. The words outside, formerly unfolded, hit him like a storm. Luna's voice, her soul, her regrets and admissions revealed onto the paper, cutting through him with a perfection that was nearly surgical. She wrote about her secret struggles, the effects she had hidden from him, from everyone, the fear that had consumed her during her last days, the people she had defended by keeping trueness locked down, the choices that had hurt Finn, that had hurt herself, and the reality that she had been living a taradiddle to shield those she loved most. Finn's hands quivered as he read about Lee's involvement, the schemes that had kept Luna from him, and the shocking disclosure that what he allowed. He knew about her exposure and death had been precisely manipulated, orchestrated behind unrestricted doors. Each line was a dagger of emotion, love, treason, grief, and the haunting tale of what if that Luna left for him to carry. His mind reeled, recollections of their moments together flashing violently across his studies, the horse laugh, the quiet nights, the touch of her hand in his, all now reframed through the lens of her trueness she could only reveal in her absence. Finn felt the room ending in, his vision blurring, and yet his heart expanded with a admixture of anguish and clarity he couldn't have anticipated. He realized that every decision he'd made after her exposure, every step he'd taken to move on, every flicker of stopgap he'd allowed himself for someone differently, had been erected on deficient knowledge. The letter spoke of love that no way wavered, fidelity that transcended miscalculations, and the deep desire that Finn should understand, forgive and continue, indeed if she couldn't be there to see it. As he read on, gashes streamed down his face, mingling with the wrathfulness and pain, and also commodity unanticipated began to take root, a sense of purpose, a resoluteness to recognize her memory not with bitterness, but with verity, action and integrity. Finn could nearly hear her voice as he folded the letter back into the envelope, a final communication echoing through his mind that life would be different, complicated, messy but honest, everything she had hoped for him. Outdoors, the megacity moved on, ignorant of the private catastrophe that had just unfolded in Finn's heart. Yet for him, nothing would ever be the same. The foundation of his understanding of the world, of the people around him, of the choices he'd made and would make, had been irreversibly shaken. The Forrester and Spencer worlds he'd navigated with conservative sanguinity now felt like a maze of retired trueness and secret commitment. And yet Luna's letter offered a strange kind of clarity, the kind only pain, honesty, and love combined could give. Finn pressed the paper to his casket, feeling her presence in a way he no way had ahead, and he knew that moving forward meant defying every taradiddle, every manipulation, every untreated story, not just for his sake but for hers, for the people they both loved, and for the integrity of the love they had participated. As night fell over Los Angeles, Finn made a silent oath that Luna's story, her courage, and her final words would not be buried, that her life and verity would guide the choices he made from this moment forward, that the heartache would not define him, but rather, the clarity and honesty she had left before would shape him, challenge him, and eventually allow him to recognize her in the only way that truly signified, by living completely, actually, and without remorse, carrying her memory. Like a compass through the uncertain and frequently unfaithful waters of love, family and fidelity in a world that had no way sounded more fragile, yet more vividly real. Finn could slightly breathe as he placed the letter on the small table before him, gaping at it as if it were a fragile artifact of another life, one he'd allowed. He understood, but now realized he'd no way truly known. The reality of Luna's words was suffocating, yet at the same time oddly liberating. She had written everything, the fears that had driven her, the secrets that had manacled her, the love that had no way wavered, indeed when circumstances made it insolvable to express. Every concession felt like a disclosure of another macrocosm, one where choices had consequences that Finn had only begun to comprehend. Memories swamped him unrelentingly, the way she had smiled when he least anticipated it, The quiet exchanges in the middle of the night when the megacity slept around them, the participated ganders that spoke more than words ever could. All of that now carried the weight of her verity, reshaping the veritably foundation of the man he allowed. He realized that his own opinions, the bones that had led him to other people, other connections had been made without the full story. Every moment of mistrustfulness, every transitory connection, every attempt at moving on suddenly felt like walking through fog. Luna's words pierced the mist, illuminating the path that had been unnoticeable until now. The letter didn't just speak to him. It shook the entire macrocosm he inhabited. Finn could see the counteraccusation sprawling outward, touching every relationship, every alliance, every fragile bond he'd maintained in the fragile ecosystems of Forrester Creations and the Spencer family. The verity of Lee's involvement, the manipulations that had orchestrated Luna's exposure, indeed the retired alliances between people he trusted implicitly, everything began to reconfigure itself in his mind. He realized that the world was far more complicated, far more unfaithful, than he'd allowed himself to see. Every smile could be concealing a motive, every grasp could carry a retired intention, and every word could be a veiled verity. And yet, the raw honesty in Luna's words also offered him commodity he'd no way anticipated, a template for navigating this maze with integrity, however, in her own way, to cover the people she loved while uncovering the verity for herself, if she had managed. Her love had been intrepid in the face of dishonesty. Maybe he could allow that courage to guide him now. Finn's studies turned to Lee, and the image of her shadowed by secretiveness eroded at him. He'd always known she was clever, determined and ruthless in her way, but Luna's letter revealed depths he'd no way suspected. Lee had defended Luna at the cost of verity, had manipulated situations to keep Finn from seeing reality, yet her conduct had been motivated, at least in part, by love. Finn plotted with the incongruity. How could someone's choices be contemporaneously defensive and destructive? And what did that mean for him now, as he tried to attune his grief with his liabilities, both to Luna's memory and to the people still living in the involved web she had left before? The more he pondered it, the more he understood that nothing in life was ever purely black or white. People like Luna were living mosaics of intentions, miscalculations, love, and regrets. To move forward, Finn would need to embrace that complexity, defy it, and find his own way through it. His aspect shifted to the snap on the wall, a shot of Luna laughing, sun in her hair, eyes bright with life. He reached out as if to touch her, but his fritters met only glass. The physical separation was inarguable, but the connection forged through her words felt as immediate, as intimate as any touch could have been. He felt her presence in every beat of his heart, every breath he drew, and every memory he cleaved to desperately. The letter had come a lifeline, a conduit to understanding not just Luna, but himself. He saw now that he'd been living in fractions, allowing grief to pall judgment, allowing the world to mandate his feelings rather than taking control of his own narrative. Luna's final act, leaving him this letter, was both a gift and a challenge. Live with honesty, embrace the verity, and recognize the love they had participated, not by recession and anguish but by action, by courage and by integrity. Finn's mind turned to the people around him, the Forresters, the Spencers, indeed the Bones, whose fidelity he'd no way questioned. Each of them would now need to defy realities that were larger than they had imagined. The ripple effect of Luna's exposures couldn't be contained. It would spread, forcing admissions, competitions, and reckonings. The alliances that had sounded solid might deteriorate, and the connections that had sounded unbreakable could falter under the weight of verity. Finn knew that he'd have to navigate this minefield with care. But more importantly, he realized that he could no longer allow secretiveness, lies, or manipulation to mandate his life. Luna had given him a chart, and the first step was clarity, seeing effects as they were, not as he wished them to be. He pictured the moment he'd eventually defy Lee, and the blend of wrathfulness, treason, and understanding churned in his casket. He couldn't ignore what had been done, yet he also knew that demonizing her would not recognize Luna. Lee's part in Luna's absence had been complicated, a admixture of devotion and deception. Finn understood that if he wanted to cover Luna's memory, he couldn't allow vengeance or blame to be the guiding force. He demanded to prize assignments, hold people responsible, and ensure that the trueness she had revealed weren't lost in the noise of emotion and reproach. The challenge would be monumental, and the emotional stakes were stunning. But Finn felt the first flicker of resoluteness. He'd defy this storm head-on, guided by Luna's words and the love they had participated. Indeed, as he reused the particular confines of the letter, Finn realized the professional and domestic counter-accusations. Forrester Creations was an area of its own, a delicate ecosystem where power, influence and heritage were intertwined with particular connections. He understood that Luna's exposures might destabilize further than his own emotional world. They could unhinge the balance of power, influence and fidelity within the company. Opinions that had sounded straightforward could now carry consequences he'd no way anticipated. And yet, he knew that avoiding battle, ignoring verity, or shining over dishonesty would be a treason not only to Luna, but to himself. He could not, in good heart, return to the world as it was. He to act, to make opinions embedded in reality, still painful that reality might be. Finn leaned back, eyes closed, the letter resting on his stage like a sacred object. The quiet hum of the megacity outside felt distant, as if the world had break down to give him this moment of reckoning. He could feel Luna's substance moping, guiding him, brooding trueness he'd been eyeless to until now. Each paragraph of her letter had been a thread, weaving together the fractured shade of his life, and now the picture was nearly complete, painful, beautiful, and irrevocable. Finn understood that grief and love could attend, that anguish could attend with purpose, and that loss could attend with action. Luna's departure had been woeful, but her words had converted that tragedy into a roadmap for adaptability, for understanding, for exacting verity. Finn's studies entwined as he considered the enormity of the trueness Luna had left him, and the longer he sat with the letter, the more he understood that the world he'd allowed, he knew was unnaturally altered. He realized that every relationship he'd nurtured, every trust he'd placed in family and musketeers, every moment of stopgap he'd allowed himself, was now viewed through a prism of deception and hidden motives. His aspect drifted to the framed prints lining the apartment walls, shots of grins, fests, and putatively ordinary moments now invested with layers of unseen complexity. The faces of the Forresters, the Spencers, and indeed those he'd considered outlanders to their involved family dramatizations, each one carried the eventuality for retired trueness, for concealed dockets that Luna's letter had illuminated, and Finn felt a sinking dread at the consummation that nothing in Los Angeles, or in his life, would ever feel simple again. He allowed of Steffi, whose unvarying determination and stubborn fidelity had always been a source of both alleviation and exasperation. He wondered how she'd reply to the trueness he now held, trueness that could upend her perception of Luna, of Lee, and of Finn himself. He considered Ridge, whose pride and sense of heritage could complicate every disclosure, and the delicate balance of alliances within Forrester Creations that had always been precarious but now sounded dangerously fragile. Finn's heart pained with the particular ramifications first, because he couldn't ignore the fact that Luna's final admissions had stripped down the defensive visions he'd cleaved to since her exposure. He'd spent innumerous nights agonizing over choices he now understood had been made under false pretenses, and the crushing weight of treason, no matter how well-intentioned, settled in his casket like a gravestone. And yet, there was a strange clarity in the pain, a paradoxical sense of emancipation. Luna's honesty, her amenability to leave everything bare on paper, gave him authorization to defy reality without concession, to demand verity from others, and most importantly, to defy himself with a courage he'd only glinted in her. Finn realized he couldn't allow himself to be swept along by emotion alone. He demanded strategy, observation, and tolerance, rates he'd honed in the medical world but now had to apply to the changeable and frequently unfaithful dynamics of his particular life. Each step he'd take, every discussion he'd have, would be guided not by fear or wrathfulness, but by a commitment to integrity and the memory of Luna's love and wisdom. The professional counter-accusations counted heavily on him as well. Forrester Creations was further than a company. It was a dynasty, a web of particular and professional alliances where a single misstep could unravel times of careful maneuvering. Luna's exposures hovered to shake not only his particular connections but the very structure of the company he'd come to admire and, in some ways, call home. He knew that defying retired trueness, especially about Lee's manipulations in Luna's absence, could spark conflicts that would resonate throughout the services, boardrooms, and design workrooms, forcing everyone from Katie to Eric, Ridge to Steffi, to reckon with realities they had long avoided. The power dynamics were delicate, and Finn understood that handling the fallout would bear a combination of tactfulness, emotional intelligence, and grim commitment to verity. Rates he'd now have to summon in ways he'd no way ahead imagined. Finn's mind also turned to Lee, the mastermind of so important secretiveness, whose conduct, though embedded in protection and love for Luna, had brought chaos and pain in equal measure. He grappled with the moral complications of holding someone responsible, while admitting that her intentions hadn't been wholly vicious. Lee had acted to shield Luna, to save what she saw as a lesser good, but in doing so, she had denied Finn the abecedarian right to know, to suffer, and to act on reality. The pressure between justice and understanding eroded at him, yet he honored that this moral nebulosity was part of the heritage Luna had left behind. A challenge to navigate the world with perceptiveness, compassion, and unvarying commitment to verity, indeed when the path was painful or unclear. He imagined defying the Forresters, Katie in particular, whose cooperation with Eric had always carried undertones of strategic ambition and emotional complexity. How would Katie reply to the full weight of Luna's verity? How would it affect her perception of Finn, of Lee, of the entire intricate shade of connection she navigated daily? Finn knew that the fallout would be explosive, that alliances would be tested, and that exposures of this magnitude could shift commitment, reshape power, and challenge the veritably identity of those who had formerly sounded imperturbable. And yet, he felt a sense of resoluteness that sustained him. Luna hadn't left him simply to suffer. She had entrusted him with clarity, with sapience, and with the tools to act decisively, to recognize her life, and to cover the integrity of the people and places she had cherished. Beyond the strategic considerations, Finn felt in violent particular grief, a anguish that would not yield. He allowed himself to flash back moments of quiet closeness with Luna, the wimpiness of her voice, the warmth of her hand in his, the subtle humor that could buck up the darkest day. These recollections, once a source of comfort, now carried the sting of disclosure. Each favored moment was reframed by her admissions, each touch and word counted against the trueness she had revealed. And yet, within the pang of loss, Finn also discovered a profound sense of purpose. Luna's life, her courage, and her final act of honesty had given him a charge to live completely, actually, and with unvarying commitment to the principles she had embodied. He understood that grief wasn't the end, but a passage, a transformative force that, when embraced with clarity and integrity, could shape his conduct, his choices, and his capacity to love and lead in a world riddled with deception and nebulosity. Finn's contemplation extended to the broader ramifications for the Spencer family. Liam, Hope, and Wyatt were all actors in a drama far larger than they realized, and the trueness Luna had unveiled would inescapably touch their lives, challenging hypotheticals, altering commitment, and reshaping family dynamics in ways that would be painful, changeable, and unrecoverable. Finn felt the burden of responsibility pressing down on him. He couldn't simply absorb the letter's exposures and retreat. He to act, to guide, to intervene, and to defy, icing that the verity illuminated rather than destroyed, that Luna's heritage was recognized rather than distorted. He allowed of the delicate connections between the Forresters and Spencers, the intricate interplay of love, contest, and ambition, and honored that navigating this geography needed both courage and finesse, rates he'd reckoned upon in drug but now had to apply in a realm fraught with emotional volatility, long-standing grievances, and the ever-present eventuality for treason. The night strengthened around him, Los Angeles stretching quietly outside his windows, unconscious to the bouleversement in his heart and mind. Finn felt the weight of solitariness, yet also the presence of Luna's guiding spirit in every word, every concession, every expression of love and stopgap she had left before. He knew that in recognizing her, he'd have to defy not only the trueness revealed in the letter but also his own fears, dubieties, and undetermined grief. He'd have to face the complexity of mortal motives, the fragility of trust, and the necessity of courage in a world where secrets frequently held further power than honesty. And yet, as he folded the letter and pressed it to his casket, he felt a quiet determination solidifying within him, a clarity of purpose that transcended anguish. He'd navigate this new reality with integrity, guided by Luna's love, strengthened by her honesty, and committed to icing that her life, her choices, and her final trueness would not be lost to silence or misreading.